Daniel, how you doing today?
Hey, Ryan, thank you very much for the invitation. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. We got lots of books in the backgrounds here, and
And they're for real.
yeah, they're
We
for
don't
real. Like we were
disappear.
just talking about, we're not like backing into a green screen or anything
That's
like
correct.
that. I was just saying right before we hit record that I've been following after we sold the business, and I was just in like a craze of digesting content from Bo Burlingham and John Warlow and traction and scaling up, and then so you were obviously in that category. And since then, I was telling your team when we were scheduling this that I've been seeing your LinkedIn and Facebook ads for years. So I feel like I know you.
I'm sorry for that. I apologize.
Well, hopefully you were putting out some pretty good and presentable ads. So it's all respect here. So for the listeners that might not be familiar with you, why don't you just give us the rundown of you, your background, kind of the things you're associated with, and then we can dive into some of the content you were talking about.
So I was born in Monterrey, Mexico, grew up in Mexico City. And very young, I did several small companies. I think my first company was when I was like 8 or 9. I did a aquarium and sold fish. I produced and grew fish in my house. I had a tank that I brought fish and then helped them reproduce and everything and then sold them. So since I was very young, and then I sold T-shirts and did all these kind of things. And then when I was in high school, they put a new rule in Mexico City. Mexico City, it's a very big city, 24 million people. So to be able to protect pollution, all that, they put a rule that one day a week your car could not go to streets. So on Tuesday, your car you couldn't get your car to the street. And if you drive your car and you were pulled over, it was like a very big fine, probably $2,000-$3,000. Wow. And then it was pounded. It was a complicated thing. So people were really mad. They couldn't use their car one day a week. So we found this auto detail franchise that you put everything on the van, water, electricity, everything. So people, before they leave to the office, they pull their car and put them outside on the street. And we did a full auto detail. Like it took us like 5 or 6 hours per car.
Oh, super cool.
But the car was like new when we bring it back. And that was kind of my first real business. I did it through high school. So it was kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And then I I went to college. I was going to start another business. And my father was worried that I was going to start another business because I was very distracted by the business in school. So he called my older brother and said, hey, please get a job for your brother. If I'm the dad, I try to get him a job, he's going to get
Protect him.
But if you're the older brother, you have to do your job, right? So my brother helped me get a job in a brokerage house in the trading floor. Oh. And I got a really great view of how the world runs in the stock market and how the real big money moves. And that's been a huge learning for me today. I was going to all the board meetings and seeing all the investors and the investors' calls and the rest. And we started trading puts and calls and all these derivatives. So it was a great learning experience. And while I was there, through some connections of my family, I got to get a job in Hong Kong. So I went, the day I graduate, that night, I went to my party. The next morning, 7 a.m., I was in the airport. And I flew to Hong Kong to work for 2 years at the Mexican consulate in Hong Kong. And I was in charge of helping the transition between Hong Kong going from England to China. I was responsible for the relationship with Mexico. Cool. Quick side note, Mexico recognized the Communist Party of China before the US. We were the first country in America to recognize the new party that was the Communist Party when they took over. And let's say the Democrat Party went to Taiwan, and that's when Taiwan and China gets divided, and the Communist Party take over China. And Mexico was the first country in America to recognize the new government, and they've always had a special relationship with Mexico because of that. So there was going to be a lot of events and a lot of delegations from Mexico. So they wanted to have a Mexican to be kind of heading that.
I'm sure the business and the trade one exploded after that.
It was really, really good. My job was more on the government side. So I receive a lot of senators and an ex-president and all that to go and have all this nice relationship and meetings and all that. It was a lot of fun. I had a couple of meetings, like Alan Greenspan. I had one day dinner with Alan Greenspan and the Mexican Minister of Finance and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. But at that time, the internet was exploding. It was 1997, 1998. And I was seeing all these magazines of kids in the US with all this money and in the covers of the magazines. And I was like, I need to do that. So I resigned to my job after 2 years, went back to Mexico, and my idea was to start Mexican startup, a text internet company. And I said, okay, what can I do? And the thing that I knew the best was finance, because my last work on the brokerage house. So I said, I'm going to do e-trade for Mexico. So I built the first electronic trading house or stock trading company for the country. And I went to the to the government and asked for a license. In the US and Mexico is very different. Just to give you an idea, Mexico we've had a boom in banks. I think we have 13 or 14 banks in the whole country. The US has like 3,000 banks, right? Yeah. So at that moment, there were 4 banks in the country and like 6 brokerage houses. So I went and asked for a brokerage house when I was like 25.
And what was the reaction?
It was a joke, like, are you joking? And I was like, no, I'm not joking.
No, I'm serious.
Work in the government there, whatever. No, we're never going to give a brokerage license to a 25-year-old, so get out of here. So I went to my house and I talked with friends and my parents. And my decision was, what can I do when E-Trade wants to come to Mexico? I will have what they need so they could acquire me, or they need to acquire me.
Cool, yeah.
So I came up with a list of 2 things. They want to have a team that could run their operations in Mexico, and they want a list of clients that know how to trade online. So I built like Yahoo Finance for the Mexican market. And that's what we started doing, with the idea of getting a brokerage house later. And very early into that, I had a competitor in Argentina called Patagon. They already had a brokerage house in Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela. And they went to JP Morgan to get this really big line. They already raised like $8 million from Chase.
Okay.
They want to raise like $50 million with JP Morgan. And when they went to JP Morgan, they said, hey, we want to be the leaders of Latin America. And if you understand a little bit of Latin America, the 2 biggest countries by far are Mexico and Brazil. Mm-hmm. So JP Morgan said, we love the story, we love the idea, but you could not say you're the dominant player in the market if you don't have Mexico and Brazil. Go and buy the number 1 player in Mexico, buy the number 1 player in Brazil, and call me. And so he called me and said, I have a line or an investment of $50 million. I need to buy someone in Mexico. You're the first. If you don't accept, I'm going to go and get to the second one and the third until I buy someone.
Yeah, they're on a mission.
Like, that's it, right? Because it was going to be game over. Someone coming with 50 million I've raised 200,000 when I did my startup. So someone coming.
How long into the business was this?
Like 8 months, 9 months into it.
Oh wow, not long at all. Yeah. How was the growth up until that point?
Pretty decent. We were the first ones to put news and the stock market. Let's say the
ticker symbols and all
ticker symbols, everything of the Mexican market online. And by the way, interestingly, in Mexico we had just one, like Reuters. You have Reuters in the US have all this data on the screens. There was one Mexican company. So when I went to them and said I want to buy your feed, and they laughed at me and said, like, how can I give you the jewel of the crown? And I had a pretty tough negotiation. I got very lucky with the CEO, and I don't know why he liked me. I was this young kid emailing and sending him letters and videos, and
not understanding the word no, right?
Yeah. And indeed, it was interesting. One day he called me and said, the agreement is done. I'm not going to discuss. I'm not going to negotiate anything. You have to go to my office in Mexico City, because he was in Monterrey. If you don't like the deal, that's it. If you're okay with the deal, sign it. And I was like, okay. Went to the office, and it was exactly what I needed.
Oh, that's awesome.
But part of that, I had to give him like 5% of the company. But it was good because then he gave me exclusivity. So I was the only one that have the opportunity to put the stock quotes online from the only Reuters in the country.
That's some crazy timing.
I was very lucky. I was very persistent, but very lucky. So whatever. So I sold to this Argentinian company called Patagon. They bought the biggest player in Brazil, another entrepreneur that he was doing amazing things, NetTrade. And next Monday, we woke up in New York, went to JP Morgan and said, okay, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela, give us 50 million. And JP Morgan helped us. We raised 53 million. We got Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Intel, Microsoft. Like, it was the best dream run you could get. Carlos Slim from Mexico and stuff. And we start growing like crazy.
Did you have any equity in the new business, or did you just cash out completely? Or was there any?
They paid me all my stocks, and then they gave me a really big bonus in options for me to be their head of Mexico and Central America.
Okay, cool.
So I stayed
a major incentive to go out there and scale the heck out of it.
That's correct. Indeed, we sold it. I'll tell you later, but we sold it 8 months later. The market was very, very hot. It was crazy.
You're selling it on hockey stick growth.
That's correct. But when we sold to Santander Acuarios, the Spanish bank, and there were a list of 13 key employees the day they bought. I was one of the 13. And if the 13, we did not stay with all our stock, the deal was not going to go through. Mm-hmm. So it was a great experience. Had a due diligence with JP Morgan and the rest. So that really obligated me to grow really, really fast, very, very young. Mm-hmm. So I was 26 when we sold to Santander, and I was 28 or 29 when I left Santander. And it was a pretty big operation.
What were your plans? What were your plans after? I mean, so, and why did you leave? So what was the next journey?
I did what I could do. We opened 5 banks, 6 brokerage houses in the region. We had 1,200 employees. It was time to leave. And we had spent in and out $1.2 billion. Back in the 2000s, that was a lot of money.
That was before we were printing trillions, right?
That's correct.
You weren't seeing the T's yet. That was when the B was a big deal.
And it was getting full with a lot of really older people and a very banking structure. It was not the right thing for me. So I left after 2 years of being the CEO. And I left in April, and I hired a lot of MBAs from Harvard and Stanford and Kellogg. And I had all these, but they were kids, both kids now, they were my age or even older than me, but they had all this jargon and they did this presentation with these cool things. And I felt that I needed all that knowledge. So I said, I want to go to an MBA and kind of after that, rebuild another business. So I went to Babson, supposedly the best business school for entrepreneurs, did my MBA there, graduated with honors, and then went back. I wanted to prove myself in the US. So I went to Austin, opened a mortgage bank in 2004. We did a subprime mortgage bank in 2004. You have to expect what happened later.
Yeah, enough said, right?
So quick story. We got a line of credit with Goldman Sachs, $500 million to give loans to undocumented Hispanics. So my business was all undocumented Hispanics. Of course, that portfolio got crushed in 2007. No, so I got a call one day. So we got it through a friend of mine in San Diego. And my friend called me one day and said, no more. I was like, what do you mean no more? I have like 80 on the pipeline. And he said, no more. You shut everything down, fire your employees. And by the way, the one you closed yesterday, you have to go and get the guy out of his house. So I had to rent a truck, go to someone's house, get all those things out, change the lock, and give him his checks back.
You didn't know that repo man was part of your job description, right?
It was hard. It's probably the toughest week I've had in my life. I fired 120 people who lost a lot of money. It was tough.
What was your biggest learning lesson out of it? Like going into the next thing, what did you reflect in that moment? I'm sure you've done it a lot over the years, but what was when you look back and go, okay, here's kind of the big takeaway?
So the biggest mistake we make as entrepreneurs is we believe that our business and us, we're the same thing. And when your business is a failure, you believe you're a failure. And that sent me in a rabbit hole. I will never want to be back there. And I had probably 6 months in big depression, gained a lot of weight, had a lot of marital issues with my wife. It was a tough space in my life.
Hey, just a small comment on that, Daniel. The reason that the show exists and my business exists and what we're doing is I read Bo Burlingham's Finish Big book.
Yep.
And I was just like, I wish I would have read this before we would have sold and made that drastic decision. Cause you just, there's this like you said, it's like your identity, your ego, the business, everything, just big, huge, ball of yarn.
The amount of entrepreneurs or CEOs or leaders of companies, after they sell their company, they get depressed. It's really high, like really high. Even if you sold it and make a lot of money, you get depressed.
What do you think?
Imagine if you lose your business and you lose your money, that's even worse.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't come with a huge, country club price tag that you can brag about, even if that's not the real number that went in your bank.
So I remember I went to my wife that night and I said, I lost everything, every penny that we have. We have no assets and I have over $1 million in debt. And that was the closing. Because I went to investors and said, okay, we all lost our money. But for us we have leases, lines of credit. You have, a business that it's ongoing.
Yeah.
And I did run out my numbers, and it was a little bit over $1 million in debt. And I said, okay, everyone puts their money and we'll clean the house. And they look at me and say like, we put our money, we already lost our money, that's it, but you own it. So I own it.
So what did you do? And then how did you, and what were there anything in like, so you got the debt, which you got financial stress, which, ripples into the.
And then I had no job. I'm from Mexico. My visa was attached to my business. So I had to come back to Mexico. It was a lot. So there were 3 phone calls that really changed my life. I will tell one of them. Vern Harnish, the author of Scaling Up. So Vern coached me before, and I went through his program called Birthing of Giants in MIT. That's how EO started and grew. And by the way, I'll tell a story later about Birthing of Giants. There's a night called the Night of the Living Death. And that's what makes the program that is. But let me. So Vern called me and said, what are you going to do? And I complained. I think I even cried on the call. I was really in a bad moment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finished after like half hour, he said, are you done? And I was like, what do you mean? Are you done complaining? And I was like, yeah.
Maybe,
and he said, what's next?
Yeah, I guess.
And he's like, what's next? And I was like, I'm going to go back to Mexico, get a job. And I need to pay the school for my kids. Like, I need to put money and food on the table. And he said, and how are you going to pay your debt? And I said, I have no idea. But I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking how to make some money just to pay for rent and school.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you start coaching and become a CEO coach? And I said, no way. I don't trust myself as an entrepreneur. How can I coach others? And he said, that's precisely why. Because you went through such a hard process that you have to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I said, I love the idea. It sounds very sexy, but first, I cannot pay you royalties. I cannot pay you for the license. And I really have to go and get a job. And he said, fine, go and get a job. And on the weekends, start coaching. And with all the money of the coaching, you start paying your debt. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I said, hey, but I cannot even pay you for licensing and the rest. He said, don't worry.
What year is this, Daniel?
This was 2010, 11 years ago. So I got certified as a Scaling Up coach back then. And I began coaching in Mexico over the weekends. And 6 months after, I was making more money on the weekends than I was making in my full week. So I resigned to my job and became a CEO coach full-time.
I got a question about that process because the numbers the money is great. I'm curious, what did you do to mentally overcome that failure feeling, or like, hey, now I can coach and I can give advice? Because I think that's kind of tied in that whole identity issue, like trying to get over that.
So there's a lot of things. And here I'll come back to the other two calls. So I got several calls when all of this process, but 3 that were significant. One was Vern. Vern is someone that I admire for many, many years, founder of EO, author of Scaling Up, like really, really important guy in the world and all that. And he called me and said, like, I know you could do this really, really well. And that was huge. Then I got a call from a very good friend from high school back then. He was the head of Google in Mexico. He was the first employee of Google in Latin America, and he was the head of Google in Mexico. And he calls me and said, hey, they just promoted me to be the head of Google in Latin America, and I need to put someone to be the head of Google Mexico. Would you want to be the CEO of Google Mexico? And I was like, no, I can't. And the guy said, why not? I said, because I just don't trust myself, cannot run it. And I declined the call. So we spent like half hour on the call, whatever, and I declined. So we hung up the phone.
Oh, wow.
The next day he called me back and he said, I'm not accepting. You said, no, you're going to go through the process. I don't care. So it was really big that in my worst moment, I was offered to be the CEO of Mexico of the biggest tech company. And that was really big for me. By the way, I went through the process. I was not offered the number 1 job. I got offered number 2 job. So I got a call from the head recruiter after like 6 months of interviews, 16 interviews. It was crazy the process they had, by the way. And that's on its own, it's a great learning experience. And she called me and said, hey, we love your experience. We love your execution, but we're very worried that you don't understand the core values of Google. So we do not want to offer you the number 1 position. We want to offer you a number 2 position. And in 1 year, we'll make you number 1. But we want to bring someone that it's a Google employee that understands culture, core values, and everything. And that moment, my coaching business was doing very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, the only way I'm going to do it and kill my coaching business is if at least I get the number 1 seat. Mm-hmm. And she said, that's not on the table. Or you accept number 2 or we stop talking. And I said, no, I don't do it. Okay, thank you very much. And she hung up. So I called her back and said, hey, wait, we're starting to negotiate. And she was like, there's no negotiation. The core values and the way we run things, it's so important that you get it, that if you're not willing to learn it, then you're not the right candidate. And I told her, hey, my coaching business has exploded. That's why I'm leaving my job for 6 months. So if I'm going to do it, it's because it's going to matter. And she said, well, that's the offer today. And I said, thank you very much. I'm not going to take it. And that was it. And then this was the third call, and was the most important for the mindset. So my parents sent me a letter, and they expressed what they were feeling and several other things, very, very important. But there was one thing that I think what made the change. They wrote in the letter saying, life gives you very few opportunities to learn fast. And today you have an amazing opportunity to learn fast. And because you have so much pain, you're not learning, because you're not really analyzing and getting it out. So we recommend that we put it on the table and learn from it. And I said, fine, I'm in. What do we do? So I called them the next day, said, what do we do? And they said, we recommend we hire this guy that he leads these kind of sessions, and let's sit down for 2 or 3 days and go through a full session. So we got in a room, 4 white walls, my wife, my mom, my dad, this guy, and myself for 3 days.
Oh, how intense was that?
It was tough.
You're putting it all on the table at that point, aren't you?
It was really tough. But I'm extremely thankful for that, because that obligated me to touch bottom and put everything on table and accept the blame and the guilt and all that, and then start rebuilding.
Was there a moment that you knew in those 3 days that you'd overcome and were ready for the next chapter?
No, I didn't have. So this guy, interesting, his model was to put me down and destroy me the first 2 days, so I could get to bottom and then start rebuilding the last day. Brilliant process. I'm still in contact with him. He's been very, very important for me and my wife.
That's awesome.
So I didn't see it at that moment, but he did this process for me to let go of everything and just start from zero. And I was 35 back then.
Okay. So then as you're rebuilding, like what was the next chapter? I mean, you got the debt, you got a new mindset, you got, there's a lot going on, but
so here's where it begins rebuilding, right? So I become a coach. The way you get clients in coaching, all that, is you do all these workshops, or in that now you do podcasts. Back then there was nothing of this, right?
The physical things, the things we're not doing today.
So I did a 2-day workshop. I rented a hotel room and all that to do a 2-day workshop, and I begged friends to come and send me their cousins, and like you can't imagine, like he was begging to get people.
Yeah, I've probably I've participated in similar situations,
and I got like 25, 30 people coming to the room, and I had all 9s and 10s at the end, and I got like 3 or 4 coaching clients after that.
Oh, cool! And
it was impressive. I remember I told my wife that night, like, I don't believe that this happened, because the impact and the mindset, it was huge. And then you begin giving lectures and giving coaching, and you start getting confidence little by little. Another thing that happened important for confidence, an entrepreneur from Guatemala, called the US, asked for a coach, and they said they were going to send you this coach from Mexico. He's the closest coach and the only one to speak Spanish. So they sent me to Guatemala. I've been to Guatemala, to the ruins, a couple of times, like different country, all that. And I was sent, this entrepreneur, very wealthy guy, picks me up in an armored car with machine guns and everything. And I was like, what? And they take me everywhere in an armored car, and work with his business, and he had a decent sized business. And then he puts me in contact with his investors. And I just begin getting to know this very big business community in Guatemala. And Guatemala is a very small country, less than 100 billion a year of revenue, the whole country GDP.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
There's 10, 15 families that they have close to $1 billion businesses in the country. And you get this small consultant with all this experience, and then I kind of begin getting connected.
Got it.
And wow, that was huge. As a way, and I tell this entrepreneur, he was very important for me as a coach, because I was from Mexico, and then they invited me to this foreign country and started giving coaching, and it was big, and that helped a lot to gain back confidence. And I started getting in projects that were really big projects, 25,000 employees, and start getting in board meetings and really big businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was huge learning and the confidence building behind that. So I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity that happened and how things got connected. It's just you're out there and you start to do your best, but then you get lucky and a lot of things begin connecting, and then that one that's on top of the other and the other,
and throughout this, are you're coaching using the scaling up framework?
Mostly,
is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably
did you have any spin by yourself or anything like that?
So I'm writing a book today that I'm going to publish over the summer called ImpactX, and that's what I've been building as my practice, my base scaling up. But I learned a couple of things. First, when I go to a company, I ask them about their systems, and they show me their accounting system and production system and customer support system, and then I say, okay, show me your CEO system. And this is what do you mean? How do you run as CEO? What tools do you use? How do you take decisions? How do you communicate decisions? And they're like, no one knows what to say. Everyone kind of baffles, right? So no one really teaches you how to be a CEO. So I start learning from all my clients, everything they did, and I start collecting what works. I've been a coach today since 2010, 2010. So 11 years. And I've learned a lot from really, really, really good entrepreneurs. I've been very lucky coaching entrepreneurs doing amazing things. And I've been collecting all this data and knowledge, and I've been putting it together. And the other thing that I learned is, as entrepreneurs, they said, hey, give me your best book, and you recommend a book or a methodology or a thought leader or something. And it really depends on what stage you are at and what problems are you having. And so my model is understanding there's 4 stages for you to scale a company. And like whenever you're a baby, kid, adolescent, an adult, you have to feed them differently. The attention is different. Like the intentions, everything is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happens with your company. Yeah. The employees that you get, the learning, the methodologies, everything. So in the book, and by the way, we'll leave a link below the podcast where they could download some slides so they could kind of follow what I'm saying. But in each stage, there's certain things you have to get right for you to be able to go to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, what I call stage 1 to 5 employees, you have to get your product market fit and you have to redo your strategy. It's all about really understanding if you have something that the market will buy or not. Yeah. Right? The only thing that matters on stage 1 is that you prove it, that you prove that there's a fit for your product and people are willing to pay for it.
A quick question in the middle as you go through this, Daniel, is how many of the people, because I'm really interested to hear the 4 stages. I'm curious, as you pulled information from people in your experience over the 11 years, how many people knew where they were at? And the reason I ask that is like this intentional, which is one of our favorite words, is if you're in stage 1, do you know you're there and why? Right? Because like when you think about stage 1, like you and I were talking as right before we jumped on, is what are your intentions? And if you don't know what your intentions are, you're kind of just bumbling around in those different stages. And so maybe, I don't know if you want to weave that in the couple other stages or.
So I'll tell you a story and then I'll explain why.
Yeah, great.
So one day I was trying to hire a coach for my business, and I called the coach and we're going to have this call kind of to understand if we like to work with each other and all that. And before I start asking him questions, he said, can I ask you a question? And I was like, oh, what? Is it your first company? And I said, no, it's my third. And the guy said, okay, great, continue. And I was like, why do you ask the question? And the coach said, well, I don't work with entrepreneurs that are being entrepreneurs for the first time. And I was like, why not? He said, because they don't know what they don't know. And they're usually very difficult to be coachable. So you already know what you don't know. So let's move forward. And that was it. And I hired him as a coach, and he was very, very instrumental for me for 2 years. Rich Rusakov. He's an expert on getting loans, and he helped me get this huge loan when I had a credit card in the US with $1,000 limit, and he got me $2.5 million of a loan for my business.
That's exponentially better than a little credit card with some.
It was amazing, and no collateral. I didn't have any collateral in the US. Of course, everything we buy we put as collateral, right. But still, like
that's crazy.
There was no comparison, right?
Yeah.
And that was his question. So no, entrepreneurs, they don't know what they don't know.
Yep.
You try to get mentors and investors that people kind of guide you, but people don't get it. So after I kind of built the model, I've been teaching the model, and I teach the model to entrepreneurs that are 4th stage and venture capitalists and the rest. And they were like, wow, like now I understand my last 20 years, why it has happened the way it has happened. And you just explained to me in an hour. So quick story. I teach this model a month ago to a group called Visioneers. There's an entrepreneur called Evan Pagan, has been selling online for many, many years, over $100 million in education. And he put this mastermind in the pandemic, and I was invited to the mastermind. Brilliant people. It's crazy the level of people in the mastermind. And I presented in December. And after I presented, there was some really good comments and the rest. And that was it. An hour after, I get a text from one entrepreneur who said, Daniel, you completely gave me a light of what has happened in my life. And he said, I had 225 employees 5 years ago. I was making $25 million of revenue, and I hated my life and my business. I was miserable. I kind of imploded my business. Today, I have 16 employees, make $7 million, and I'm the happiest ever with my business. I really believe on stage 2, whenever you're around, let's say 8 to 12 employees, that's the best combination of revenue, profit to you as the owner, and drama. If you passed 12, the drama just goes through the roof. And then you get to stage 3, that I call the scaling stage. And the stage 3 has like the valley of death between the stages that goes, let's say, around 12, 15 to around 60, 80. The valley of death is really horrible. So if you jump above 12, 15, you have to go all the way until 60, 80. If you're going to stay in the middle, don't even do it.
And you're referring to employees right now. Is there revenue or EBITDA sizes that correlate to that? Because I know, like, different industries are kind of set up differently.
There is, but I'll give you one standard. And by the way, it changes if you're in technology and other things, but I'll kind of give you a standard. Okay. The average mid-market or small business in the US, service business and all that, they do an average of $120,000 revenue per employee per year. So whenever I talk with someone, I always ask them, how many employees do you have? And they say, I have 10 employees. Oh, you should be doing around $1 million too. And they look at us like, did I show you my financials? And I was like, no, but that's the average. Like everyone does that, right? Yeah. Mexico, as an example, my home country, we do $40,000 per employee. India, $18,000 per employee. And it's a standard. That's what the market bears, the education, like that's what it is.
Yeah.
Indeed, I had a call on Monday with an entrepreneur in Leon, Mexico. And the guy said, yeah, I have X amount of employees. And I said, you're doing between 75 and 80 million pesos. And the guy was quiet. And he said, I did 77. Like,
yeah. The law of averages is working out for us.
By the way, imagine the confidence that you gain when you said, well, you should be doing between this. And the guy's like, you were exactly in the middle. And it's just what it is. So we usually tell revenue per employee because depending on your market and your industry, that's the average. As an example, a tech company in the small market should be doing around 200,000 revenue per employee. Fortune 500, those are around $1 million per employee. Okay.
Super interesting. I think our old business, Daniel, I want to say it was like 200 or 250 per employee. And that's what, it's.
But you got it to 10 million revenue, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think you were in the second part of stage 3.
Got it.
You were probably around the 150, the average. You were doing a little bit more than that.
Got it. Yeah.
But at around 10 million, you should be doing around 150 per employee in the US.
Okay. Yeah. Because at 20 million, we had 115 employees. We had too many employees at that point, but there it goes.
Yeah. So what I usually talk about number of employees, one, because your market and industry, but two, the complexity of the operation is the amount of employees. It's not your revenue. The complexity is because the amount of team members that you have. So what happened after 12, 15? You have to start getting your first line of managers. And that's where all hell breaks loose. Because you have to, instead of being a leader one-to-one, you have to be a leader one-to-many. And the complexity of leadership one-to-many is astronomically more difficult than one-to-one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then gets you to around 60, 80, that you should be doing around 10 million mark.
Okay.
You have enough margin to hire an amazing line of defense.
Totally.
A great CFO, great head of operations, great head of sales. Until then, you don't have enough margin to hire a high caliber team. And that's why that valley of death between stage 2 and stage 3 is really, really tough between 12, 15 to 60, 80.
Because you're cash strapped and you're trying to grab the bull by the horns and you're running with it.
And you have to invest in infrastructure heavily. You implement SAP and all these kind of new tools that you don't have the money.
So I want to make a couple comments, and I'm really interested to hear how you weave this into your 4 stages, Daniel. So like some themes that we've been gravitating towards over the last year or so in our business is, so the word, kind of the intentional growth thought process is like, hey, like, what am I trying to accomplish long term? Like, what's the target valuation, target exit that I might be margin towards? What do I want to do with my role versus the financial asset that I've created? And essentially just reverse engineering your plan. But it relates a lot to what you're saying, because we've never obviously articulated like you are, but growth is expensive. So if you're trying to, so that's one concept about the end in mind, but then this shift in mindset away from annual income to long-term value creation. So how many times you've seen someone where they're optimizing for their distributions and they're not investing versus a plan to reinvest that cash flow to fund what you're talking about. And no one really, we see the lack of the financial acumen really hamstrings people because they don't know how to map that out. And so what happens is we see so many times where people don't make a decision, which just means they don't know how they're accelerating through those 4 stages.
And here's the tough part. Imagine you are a kid, you're going to be an adult, you're an adolescent. And whenever you're an adolescent with all the hormones and everything, you have a lot of drama, right? Same thing happens in this stage. If you don't understand that you're going to go through those hormones and drama, you prefer to come back and be a kid. You can't imagine how many companies they said, this is just too much, I'm going to go back.
No joke, quote unquote, from a client of ours that went through one of our training programs. He said they scaled up to 53 employees and he scaled back down to 16 because of that exact reason, what you just said. He was making less money with more headaches, so he scaled back down.
But so here's the issue. Because that guy didn't understand, he said, I'm out, and went back to 16, right? He didn't understand that he probably needed to go to 60 or 70, and he was past the drama, right? That's a difficult part. You need to, if you're able to understand that, then you're able to take the decision correctly. Because
I couldn't agree with you more, Dan, because like I believe that if people know why, you can deal with the challenges. But if you don't know why it's happening, you're gonna, the expectations are loose and you just don't know what to do.
That's correct. Game over. So whenever you get to around 60 and 80, how many private equities funds are out there that they're dying to take your company over your hands?
Yeah, begging you to take their money.
Yeah. So they if he was able to take the 65, 70, he was probably going to get a private equity fund to put 10, 15 million into his business and take it off his hands.
Oh my gosh.
He didn't want to do it.
So I got a couple questions out. So I love how you enter drama in there. And so I want your definition of drama. But before I do, so like when we turned around the family business, there was a lot of drama, like toxic people. And then it became amazing. We read the Zappos culture and the delivering happiness. God bless Tony. And like, what is your definition? I know what I went through. I'm curious. And like, when you use it, like what are some of the scenarios?
So let me explain drama on the client side. So sometimes you go to a restaurant and there's music, the waiters are in a nice mood, your food comes on time, hot, all that. And sometimes you go to restaurants and you hear the waiters shouting to each other, plates falling, the food comes to you late, cold. That's drama. That's how people feel it, right?
Totally.
That's how it feels. And so if you as a client feel like that, inside it's times 5, right? Like people get out of the office at 5 or 6 and they're exhausted. It's like they feel they come in and there's a battle. You have to be defending yourself and fighting and not talking to people and protecting. And it's a lot of drama. If you have a team that has great culture, is the right team, whatever, no drama. Everyone knows what you need to do. You have the right money to hire the right people, completely different. So if you're able to play chess, let's say, and understand your moves, 5, 10 moves before, and you say, hey, I'm going to need $5 million of investment or $3 million of investment in a year. I start looking for it with time, like all these kind of things. You could plan it correctly if you really understand the game. But if you don't understand the game, you realize you need to raise $2 million whenever you're already $1 million in debt and the bank chasing you and all these kind of things. And that creates a lot of drama. The amount of times that I get, so I've been in a lot of meetings with clients that I'm with the CEO and a team, and the CEO becomes rambling and shouting, all that. I've been getting all the text from their employees. Please ask him to get quiet. Like, people are losing respect. Please save my boss. Like, all the time. But we have so much pressure that we need a space to let that pressure go. And we just explode like a cooker. There's a poof, and we just begin shouting and rambling. And it's really painful for your team. It's really painful. I had one of those. I had a meltdown like 3 years ago. It was something dumb, but I was really tired. And the person that did it, my feeling is they didn't care, right? Mm-hmm. That was what it was really. And I shouted and I was in a really bad mood. And I realized it was not as big, but for me, I made it really big because of my stage at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I called my employee next day and said, hey, first of all, I'm sorry. I should not have shouted, blah, blah. You were wrong, but it was still wrong for me to say the way I said it. Mm-hmm. My first question is, do you want to work here? And she said, no, I'm out.
There you go.
And I said, fine, I'll help you get a job. Mm-hmm. So I told her, any company of any of my friends that you want to work, I'll send a letter and I'll call the CEO. And she said, I've always admired this company. Can you help me get a job? I called the CEO and said, this is what happened. She's a great employee. She made this mistake. She doesn't want to work here anymore. I strongly recommend that you hire her. And they said, thank you very much. Send it to us.
Oh, super cool. Yeah. I noticed as we were going through, because we were probably in that stage 3-ish. And when we were turning around, it was like all that stuff that just kind of the pent up demand of the infrastructure investment, all the people investment, all the stuff that you're talking about. I remember like, it was that kind of that first restaurant example you gave, Daniel. And like this, when we were done with that whole process, that joy and the happiness and people's ability to just enjoy each other because the data was there. And so this was a pure survival mode for me, where like to eliminate the drama, because it was so like, I mean, when you go home, right? Like, okay, where's the Captain Morgan? Give me the Diet Coke. And it was just like, if we can eliminate that by just making the data the enemy and the competition the enemy, it was. And then like I would sit down and I'd sit someone across from me and like, I like you, we're on board with same core values, all this, but this is what we got to do. And then if they didn't accomplish it, it was their fault. It wasn't my fault. And it was just like, so the data became kind of my crutch to, not necessarily a crutch, but my enabler for that.
That's why I'm so biased with scaling up, and I love the model so much. Scaling up, as my partner says, makes everything float, and a lot of things stink. But you need to have a system that will make everything float, so you will understand what stinks. And whenever we implement scaling up in a company, you put dashboards and KPIs for everyone, and it's crazy what happens. It's like there's no hiding. And by the way, I've been hired several times from family businesses in Latin America or in Africa, stuff like that. A lot of the big business are family business. There's no secondary market to sell your business. Mm-hmm. So they keep it in family for several generations. And they're usually pretty big businesses. And I tell them, disclaimer, like, if you implement scaling up, you won't be able to protect anyone. Not even your father, your son, your nephew, no one, right? So I'm just giving you a disclaimer. It's going to be amazing having scaling up, but watch out. Tell me before, and I asked them, tell me if there's any skeleton on the closet, because it's going to come out. So just make sure. And I've heard, you can't imagine stories I've heard. Like you really can't understand the stories I've heard. Indeed. Quick story, fun story. One day I got hired by the CEO, and he said, we're 6 cousins working in the company and 3 or 4 need to go. But if I fire my cousins, my grandma will hate me. So I need you first to help me identify and have data why I need to fire my cousins. And then I need you to go and convince my grandma. Mm-hmm. So after we got all the data, I went to have dinner with the grandma myself. I just present the data to her and convince her that it was time to get the nephews out.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's just, and I've had people sleeping with people and creating drama. It's a lot, but that's reality.
business is made out of people, right?
Like people, and people were messy.
How many times you've seen a private equity firm that's got this beautiful spreadsheet of valuation, multiple growth, and you're like, there are people that are supposed to execute these numbers, by the way.
So in Mexico, as an example, we have now a lot of private equity and venture capital funds that we didn't have before. We've had an explosion of capital. Most of the funds in Mexico are built by finance people, not by entrepreneurs. Yep. In the US, most of the most successful venture capitals are done by entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that now they went into the money side. So a lot of the funds in Mexico and Latin America are run by finance people that they're not very experts on running companies. Mm-hmm. So in Latin America, I work a lot with the funds. And they said, hey, we're investing $20, $30 million in this company. We're going to give them 30 million plus 300,000 that has Daniel Marco's name. And you're going to go with the CEO for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And you're going to make sure that communication gets done right. Mm-hmm. And I'm sent from the fund kind of to help align interest between the entrepreneur and the fund. And most of the times, I'm on side of entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. The fund just asks for things that cannot be delivered. And my job is to come back to them and say, here's the data.
It's interesting, Daniel. In a previous show episode, I talked about like a Venn diagram. You have finance as one circle, and then operations and business running as another. And then there's a little circle in between that are a small percentage of people that understand both. And I don't know how the understanding of, when I say finance, like valuation, value growth, like multiples, like how important, or how do you get people in the understanding those 4 stages of growth to understand the numbers are the path to get there, but such few people went to MIT and had a finance degree or something like that. So they know how to sell stuff. They know their marketplace is super competitive, but they don't understand that part.
So quick story. I work a lot with John Ratliff, scaling up coach, brilliant guy. He grew a company and sold it. And in the process of selling it, he realized the amount of mistakes entrepreneurs make when they're selling it. And it's crazy that we spend years and years and years growing companies. And whenever we come to the time of selling it, we don't really understand the process and leave a lot of money on the table, but like a lot of money on the table. And I work with John precisely with that. Every time we get a company he wants to sell, I send them to John. He does that. And when we sit down with an entrepreneur and kind of understand their value, and it's just, they have no idea what they have in their hands. They have no idea how the markets work and how to work with the private equity group. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we've seen numbers that you just can't believe, that the entrepreneur said, yeah, my company is worth 20. And when we come and value it and really understand what it is, it's probably worth 75. Mm-hmm. And they just have no idea. And they said, no, if you give me 20, I'll be happy. Indeed, my wife says, if you give me 10, I'll be happy. I was like, it's worth 70 or 80.
Right. Because they don't understand the value of the asset.
That's correct.
All right, Daniel, I know we're running short on time here. This has been a fun conversation. You got your internal team blasting you. So let's wrap it up. You're going to have a bunch of links in the show notes. So
I'll give you one link for you to download a lot of slides. Yep. And on the slides, I kind of show the 4 stages, what you have to do in each stage to get it right and go to the next stage. And then there's 4 or 5 slides, how you have to evolve from entrepreneur to CEO.
Awesome.
We become the bottlenecks of our businesses. We are the biggest bottleneck everywhere in our companies. So here's just the second part of the model. You have to fix 3 things or work in 3 things. First, work on you. And you have to have all these tools to help you grow and become a CEO and a better leader. So you could really build a great team. People say, I want to build a great company. And I was like, you cannot build a great company if you don't first build a great team. And if first you become a great leader. Mm-hmm. Like there's 2 steps before. So there's a lot of tools for you to become a better leader. There's all these tools for you to build a great team. And then there's these tools for you to build a great company. Mm-hmm. So we have this grid of 48 things of what you have to do in each stage in these 3 things.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Go and improve. So yes.
2 questions. What does the word intentional mean to you?
Intentional, that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of people don't understand why they do what they do.
I love it. What's the best place to get in touch with you and all of the material that you guys are, and the book, all the stuff that you guys are?
So my book's going to be called ImpactX. It's going to be published in the summer. I will give the link below for you to get some slides. And after the slides, you're going to get an email with a link. And we have like a 2.5-hour video of me getting all the first part of the module of ImpactX for free. I'm just giving away the words.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a blast.
Same to you. Thank you, Ryan. And we have to have a longer conversation, you and I. Thank you. Bye.